Have you ever met someone who smiles at your success, but somehow leaves you feeling uncomfortable? Or maybe you've noticed that every time something good happens in your life, a certain person suddenly becomes distant, overly critical, or strangely quiet. Most people assume envy looks obvious. They imagine jealousy as angry words, obvious competition, or open hostility. But psychology tells a completely different story. The truth is, the people who secretly envy you rarely admit it, even to themselves. Instead, their emotions leak out through subtle behaviors they can't fully control. And once you learn to recognize these hidden signs, you'll start seeing them everywhere. Create curiosity. Here's what's fascinating. Secret envy isn't always about wanting what you have. Sometimes it's about what your existence reminds them they don't have. Your confidence, your happiness, your discipline, even your peace. Without realizing it, your success becomes a mirror. And for some people, that reflection is painful. Today, we're exploring 5 psychological signs that someone secretly envies you, why these behaviors happen, what neuroscience reveals about envy, and how to respond without becoming trapped in negativity. Because understanding envy isn't about judging others. It's about protecting your own peace. Part 1. What is secret envy? Envy is one of the oldest human emotions. It's universal. Everyone experiences it at some point. Psychologists define envy as the uncomfortable feeling that arises when another person's success highlights something we wish we had ourselves. Notice something important. Envy isn't the same as admiration. Admiration inspires. Envy compares. Admiration says, I want to become like them. Envy says, I don't want them to have it. The difficult part? Many people never consciously admit they're envious. Their brain protects their self-image. Instead of thinking, I'm jealous, they unconsciously convince themselves they're lucky. They don't deserve it. They're probably pretending. The emotion hides itself, but the behavior doesn't. Sign 1. They downplay your achievements. Have you ever shared exciting news only to receive a response like, that's nice. Anyone could do that. Let's see how long it lasts. Instead of celebrating with you, they minimize your success. Why? Because your achievement creates psychological discomfort. In psychology, this is called social comparison. Human beings naturally compare themselves with others. When someone sees you progressing while they feel stuck, their brain experiences a threat to self-esteem, rather than improving themselves. It's emotionally easier to reduce the value of your accomplishment. If your success becomes not a big deal, then they don't have to question their own life. That's why genuine supporters celebrate your wins. Secretly envious people explain them away. Sign 2. They constantly compare themselves to you. Some comparisons seem harmless, but others become obsessive. Maybe they suddenly buy what you buy, copy your hobbies, compete with every achievement, or somehow every conversation becomes about proving they're doing just as well. This isn't confidence. It's insecurity searching for balance. Psychologists explain this through upward social comparison. When someone compares themselves to a person they perceive as more successful, it can motivate growth. But if their self-esteem is fragile, that comparison becomes painful. Instead of inspiration, they experience resentment. Ironically, the more attention they pay to your life, the less energy they invest in improving their own. Sign 3. They celebrate your failures more than your successes. This one is subtle. When something goes wrong in your life, they suddenly become very interested. They ask questions, offer sympathy, stay engaged. But when you succeed, they disappear or become strangely quiet. Why? Because failure restores psychological balance. Your setback temporarily removes the uncomfortable comparison. Researchers often describe this as schadenfreude, the tendency to experience satisfaction when someone perceived as higher status experiences failure. Most people would never admit feeling this, but emotions don't always follow our values. The brain constantly seeks emotional equilibrium, and for an envious person, your failure briefly provides relief. Sign 4. They give backhanded compliments. A genuine compliment feels warm. A backhanded compliment feels confusing. You're actually smarter than I expected. You look great for your age. I'm surprised you pulled that off. Notice the pattern. The compliment comes with hidden criticism. Psychologically, this allows someone to appear supportive while still protecting their own ego. It's a clever compromise. Their conscious mind wants to seem kind. Their unconscious envy wants to reduce your confidence. So both messages come out together. These mixed signals often leave people questioning themselves. That's exactly why they're effective. Sign 5. They disappear when you grow. Perhaps the strongest sign isn't criticism. It's distance. Some friendships slowly fade the moment your life improves. You become healthier, more successful, more confident, more emotionally stable. Instead of growing alongside you, they quietly withdraw. This isn't always intentional. Growth changes relationships. Sometimes your progress reminds people of the changes they've been avoiding. Remaining close becomes emotionally uncomfortable, so they create distance. Not because you've changed into someone worse, but because you've become a reminder of what's possible. Part 2. Why does envy happen? Most people think envy comes from hatred. Psychology says something much deeper. Envy usually begins with insecurity. Children who grow up constantly compared to siblings. Students praised only for outperforming classmates. Adults whose self-worth depends on external validation often become more vulnerable to envy later in life. Their brain learns an unhealthy equation. Someone else's success means less success for me. But life isn't a competition with fixed winners. Unfortunately, our emotional brain doesn't always understand that. Part 3. What your brain is doing. Here's where neuroscience becomes fascinating. When someone experiences envy, the brain's anterior cingulate cortex often becomes active. This region processes emotional pain. In other words, watching someone else's success can literally hurt. At the same time, the amygdala evaluates whether that success threatens social status. If it does, stress hormones like cortisol may increase. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking, tries to regulate these emotions. When emotional control is strong, envy transforms into inspiration. When emotional control is weak, envy turns into criticism, competition, gossip, or passive aggression. The brain isn't trying to create conflict. It's trying to protect self-esteem. Unfortunately, it often chooses unhealthy shortcuts. Part 4. What research says. Psychological research consistently shows that social comparison strongly influences emotional well-being. Researchers have found that people naturally evaluate themselves by comparing their lives with those around them. Studies also suggest that envy becomes more intense when the other person feels similar. That's why coworkers often envy coworkers. Friends envy friends. Neighbors envy neighbors. Strangers rarely trigger the same emotional reaction. Why? Because they're not direct comparisons. According to psychologists, the closer someone is to your own age, lifestyle, career, or background, the more your achievements challenge their self-image. Ironically, sometimes the people closest to you struggle the most with your success. Part 5. A real-life example. Imagine two friends who graduate together. Both dream of starting successful businesses. One takes action immediately. The other keeps waiting for the perfect time. 5 years later, the first friend builds a thriving company. The second hasn't started. Every time they meet, something feels different. The successful friend shares exciting news. The other responds, "You're just lucky. The economy helped you. Anyone could have done it." Notice what's happening. They're not attacking success. They're protecting identity. If the successful friend earned everything through effort, then the other must confront years of procrastination. That's painful. So the brain creates a more comfortable explanation. Luck, privilege, timing. Anything except personal responsibility. Part 6. Why most people get this wrong. Here's the biggest misconception. People think envious individuals hate successful people. Usually, they don't. They actually admire them. The problem is, admiration mixed with insecurity becomes envy. Another mistake? Assuming you should constantly prove yourself to earn approval. But approval isn't the cure for envy. In fact, the more successful you become, the more comparisons you'll unintentionally trigger. Trying to shrink yourself so others feel comfortable never solves the problem. It only teaches people that your confidence depends on their approval. Part 7. The hidden consequences. If secret envy remains unchecked, relationships slowly become toxic. Trust disappears. Conversations become competitions. Achievements become uncomfortable to share. Over time, you may even begin hiding your own happiness. Psychologists sometimes call this self-silencing. You stop celebrating promotions. You hide accomplishments. You minimize your dreams. Not because you're ashamed, but because you're trying to avoid negative reactions. Eventually, you begin living smaller than you truly are. And that's one of envy's greatest victories. Part 8. How to handle envious people. Fortunately, you don't need to fight envy. You need to understand it. Here are 5 practical strategies. First, don't overshare every success. Not everyone deserves front-row access to your victories. Protect your peace. Second, avoid unnecessary competition. Your goal isn't to win against others. It's to improve your own life. Third, observe patterns instead of isolated moments. Anyone can have a bad day. Look for consistent behaviors. Fourth, maintain healthy boundaries. Supportive relationships energize you. Envious relationships drain you. Choose accordingly. Finally, never reduce your light to make others comfortable. Your growth isn't an attack on anyone else. People inspired by you will grow with you. People threatened by you will drift away. Both responses tell you something important. Part 9. The identity shift. The real goal isn't learning how to detect envy. It's becoming someone who no longer depends on external validation. Because once your confidence comes from your own values, other people's opinions lose much of their power. You stop chasing approval. You stop explaining your success. You stop apologizing for your growth. Instead, you become someone who quietly keeps improving. And that kind of confidence is remarkably difficult to shake. Part 10. The challenge. For the next 7 days, pay attention to people's reactions instead of their words. Who celebrates your wins? Who changes the subject? Who becomes unusually quiet? Who encourages your growth? And most importantly, ask yourself one honest question. When someone else succeeds, do you feel inspired or threatened? Because recognizing envy in others is useful. Recognizing it within ourselves, that's where real growth begins. The people who secretly envy you rarely announce it. Their behavior speaks long before their words ever do. Remember, not every critic is envious. Not every quiet person dislikes you. But consistent patterns reveal hidden emotions that even people themselves may not recognize. Your success isn't responsible for someone else's insecurity. And protecting your peace doesn't require guilt. It requires awareness. So tell us in the comments. Have you ever realized someone secretly envied you? Or have you ever caught yourself comparing your life to someone else's? If you enjoyed this video and want to understand the hidden psychology behind everyday life, make sure to subscribe, because there's always more to discover.